I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I don't know who all the people are from the different townships or whatever, and I want to thank you. The air conditioning is working so great in here tonight. I hope everybody stays cool. And I got one thing to say, and that is that I'd like to thank Pilar. Would you please stand up, Garasimo? She's the gal that really put this whole thing together, and she's did a fantastic job. And at this time, I want to present to you Tom Quinn. He's from the Dunn County Board of Supervisors, and he's going to be your featured speaker throughout the evening. Thanks, Tom, for coming.
Welcome, everybody. So as Rocky mentioned, I'm on the Dunn County Board. I live in Downing. I see some of my supervisors are here tonight. And I'm actually going to be lightly moderating the event. I don't think it'll need much moderation, but just a little bit, maybe. So we're going to have three speakers. In order to make provide as much time for discussion as possible, I think what we'll do is our first speaker is Curtis Stepanek from the Department of Revenue, and Curtis may have to leave, so we'll do his presentation and then take questions on that, and then have Glenn Stoddard do his presentation, and then maybe have one or two questions to Glenn, and then have Ron make his presentation, and we'll take a break after Glenn's presentation. Is that right? Yeah, break after Glenn's presentation, and a couple questions. And then we'll have Ron make his presentation, and then we'll open it up for discussions. And whoever of the panelists can stay, I think both the two of you can stay for quite a while. And just have a good back and forth discussion, get some good ideas on the table. I think you'll find all three speakers are very interesting and have a lot of really good information for us as public officials. We also have, of course, people here who aren't on town boards, but who have been very active in the issue, and we welcome and appreciate their presence and information and knowledge also. So with that, Curtis, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'd like to thank everyone for coming and also for the opportunity to be here. I'm actually standing in for my supervisor of assessments, Kelly Colson. Okay, we'll get it. Who could not make it tonight. But I've been a property appraiser for the manufacturing district office in Eau Claire for the last 15 years, and I've been certified as a state assessor for the last 30 years. Our Eau Claire office is actually, the proper name for it is Manufacturing Assessment, Utility and Telco. And we not only assess manufacturing property, but also power companies, pipelines, railroads, and airlines as well. So it's not just manufacturing. There's 5 appraisers that work out of the Eau Claire office, plus the supervisor, Kelly Colson. And we cover 32 counties based out of the Eau Claire district office. There's 4 state offices for manufacturing, utility, and telco. Green Bay, Eau Claire, Madison, and Milwaukee. And our 32 counties extend from, if you drew a line up by Eagle River, which is in Vilas County, and drew it down south of La Crosse to Vernon County, we cover everything north and west of that. We do straddle on the other side of that line in the central part of the state. So our district is approximately half the geographic region of the state of Wisconsin. And if you look at a map of the state, you'll notice that the counties, as the farther west and north you get, the counties geographically get larger, and also there's fewer people living there, and manufacturing, there's pockets of it, but there's fewer manufacturing plants. You know, it's really, there is a concentration in the southeast part of the state. But out of our Eau Claire district, between real estate and personal property accounts, we have, there's a little over 5,000 accounts we're responsible for. I'm just laying the groundwork because I know this is going to, we're going to talk about valuing Frac-Sand plants here, but I'm just laying the groundwork of what we do in general terms. When we talk about manufacturing plants, we're talking a wide spectrum of products. It could be food products, It could be steel products, fabrication. The spectrum is so broad and wide. It really is quite an interesting job that we have. And when we audit these companies in given counties, we get to basically take a factory tour when we go there, which makes it quite very, very interesting. Some of the local manufacturing plants that we do that you're probably going to be familiar with, the larger ones are like Cardinal Glass, which only makes one product, is window glass. 3M is a company based in Menominee. Everybody's familiar with that. They make a wide range of products there in an extremely large facility there. Banks Hardwoods in Menominee. Vets Plus right here in Knapp is classified manufacturing. Up in Boyceville, we have Ole America, which was known as A.B. Maury Foods. Nedlin Manufacturing in Ridgeland, they take steel and turn it into garbage dumpsters. ConAgra in Menominee make cocoa mixes and the shelf-stable and refrigerated pudding. Lucette Brewing is a new one we picked up just a couple years ago. They take barley malt water and turn it into beer. And another common name everybody would identify with, Phillips Plastic has 4 plants in the city of Menominee there. And then back to Boyceville, we got what's now known as Big Rivers Resources, the ethanol processing plant in the town of Hay River outside of Boyceville. And another one people aren't going to be familiar with, but the only oil refinery in the state of Wisconsin is actually located in Superior, Wisconsin. And for many years, it was known as Murphy Oil Company, based out of Arkansas. But just last year, it was sold to Calumet Refining out of Indianapolis, Indiana. But that is the only place that oil is refined in the state through the Lakehead Pipeline, which comes up through Canada and southern Canada and the Prairie provinces there. So I just want to lay the groundwork before we get into the discussion of the actual and look at some pictures of the Frac-Sand plant here. In order to be classified as manufacturing and assessed through our manufacturing office, essentially, and I'm just speaking in general terms, you need to take a raw material and turn it into a product. Now, that's just generally speaking. You can't break bulk and package things. That's not manufacturing. You need to take steel, fabricate it, and turn it into a garbage dumpster like Nedlin does. You got to take food ingredients. You take milk, you take various ingredients and turn it into cheese. That's manufacturing. So that you're not manufacturing until we classify you and qualify you. And there's certain other criteria that you have to meet before you're assessed through our local office there. I'm going to just start the PowerPoint here. And he told me to step back here. And this will deal with in this case, the Frac-Sand real and personal property assessment. And we're going to just touch on real estate, personal property, and then take some questions at the end of the presentation here. Okay, in this case, why does the assess manufacturers? The manufacturing law was enacted in 1973. I believe it went into effect in 74. And it was really, essentially, it was meant to be competitive with other states. Other states were giving tax incentives and tax breaks to manufacturing to encourage it. And we didn't have anything, so they came up with this law, the exempt machinery and equipment. That's the meat of the law. Your direct production equipment, and it can be indirect as well, that's used in the manufacturing process is exempt from personal property taxation. We have personal property taxation in the state of Wisconsin here. So we as an appraiser, we think of it in the terms of where does the manufacturing process start in terms of a line, where you take your raw materials and begin putting them into your process. As it moves along, all that machinery, equipment, et cetera, used to build or make that product, all that equipment is exempt from personal property taxes. When it gets done at the other end, as it comes out and then it's ready to be shipped, it's stored, it's shelved. That, in that point, things are taxable, any of the equipment used. And same with prior to that, when that process starts, all that, any equipment you're using is taxable. And this is just how do we learn about new manufacturers, in this case sand processings. It's really, a lot of it's word of mouth, newspapers, the general public, local municipal officials, town chairmen, village presidents, so on and so forth. But local assessors may tip us off and say, we had this empty building in the town or the city, and now there's a guy, he's making widgets there. And we'll get a name, telephone number, and if we have to, we'll visit the property to see if he does meet the criteria that we have for manufacturing. In other words, you're not a manufacturer till we qualify you and classify and say you're a manufacturer. The contact with any potential manufacturer must be made by March 1st. In other words, if after March 1st, that's our deadline, we can't do anything about it at that point in time. And then we send out a questionnaire, an informational letter to a potential manufacturer, and like I mentioned, we may have, if we're skeptical, we've talked to them on the phone, it's unclear what they're really doing, we may have to go visit them to make sure. And we might have, sometimes we'll have the same company has multiple locations in the state. In that case, they may have a new operation, say they set up a new operation in the city of Chippewa Falls, but we already have them in Green Bay. There's no need to really classify them, as long as they're not, they're just renting a building, and they might not be manufacturing there, possibly. And municipalities have the contract assessors who don't, may not live in the immediate area. If local community officials are aware of activity, they should notify us if anybody that thinks there's a manufacturing at the local levels. You're kind of our eyes and ears, because when you cover 34 counties, we don't get around to every county every year. And like I mentioned, if we we need to usually have contact by March 1st of the year. The DOR, which is us, will determine if property qualifies as an operating mine and sand plant as manufacturing. And then when we do pick up a new manufacturer, we send out a letter to the local clerk, the county property lister, and the local assessor, so there's no confusion over a double assessment. In other words, your local assessor assesses Murphy or Calumet Refining in Superior, and we're also doing it. That'll generate some real problems at the end of the year for the treasurers. In this case, in terms of real estate, we assess, once we assess it, we take it from the local assessor, and now it's our responsibility. All lands, building structures, property used in manufacturing, etc. Also, structures in support of manufacturing. Oftentimes we use that term in support of a lot of its warehousing they have. And then personal property, all machinery, equipment, furniture, fixtures, computers, supplies owned by the manufacturing, and other various classified equipment. What manufacturing equipment is in? The manufacturer has to report to us every year what they file. If they own real estate we're assessing, they have to file what we call a manufacturing real estate return or a manufacturing personal property return. In other words, the state says, we're going to give you this tax exemption for your exempt machinery and equipment, but in return for that, we want you need to file this form with our office every year, once a year. And it's got to be filed by March 1st or April 1st if they file for an extension. And that's what we do in our office. We audit those forms for accuracy, essentially. And now I'm just going to, and then what manufacturing equipment is exempt? Like I mentioned, any of your direct production equipment, but I'm going to go down just briefly to make it a little more sensible. What's taxable would be shipping and receiving equipment, raw material storage, Finished product storage equipment, including refrigeration, equipment used for storing work in progress more than 3 days, forklifts that are used in a warehouse, hopper feed tanks that are freestanding from an exempt machine. And what's exempt would be equipment used for storing work in progress less than 3 days, forklifts, conveyors, moving materials to the process line, any machinery that's doing the building of your product or making your finished product. Safety equipment is taxable. R&D equipment is taxable. Quality control equipment during the process is exempt. But that's what our job is, to evaluate that at all these different manufacturers of different products. Boilers, generators, and transformers are all taxable as well, except hog fuel boilers that are burning wood waste products only. Sawdust, bark, and things like that qualify as waste treatment. We've got some slides here, basically of a Frac-Sand mine, and this particular one is in Jackson County, and it's a large operation. It's been there for many years, and they've got hundreds of acres we assess to them that they own, and they also own hundreds of acres for future development. They've been rapidly buying a lot of land down in Jackson County, no doubt to keep other Frac-Sand companies at bay or at distance down there. And this is a processing tower they have on the site, and then an office, electrical power building. The buildings are taxable. This is a scale room. Now this is the main processing plant here, where they're actually working the sand, screening it, sorting it, of the sand crystals, washing it, and then get it ready for shipping. The buildings are taxable, but most of the apparatus you see are exempt, considered exempt equipment. And this is the wash and screen plant. Not a very good picture here. This building, this is all taxable. It's a maintenance shop, and it's a railroad car wash where they bring the railroad cars in on their own sidings there and rinse them out and clean them up there. And these are storage tanks for sand, dry sand silos. It's actually work in progress prior to the screening. So these would be exempt because they're holding the sand and it's ready to get moved into the process for further refinement. Now now we're at the rail loading site. Now that we're loading the finished product, taking it from where it's stored, now we're loading the finished product on rail. They do also have truck loading there, but most of the sand, because of the sheer weight of it, it's most efficient to be taken out on rail and shipped that way. And of course, a lot of that sand, what we're told, most of that sand is actually going to Texas, is the major point of it. And then somehow they're shipping it, a lot of it's going up to the shale oil fields up near Williston, North Dakota, for the frac sanding there. But this rail loading, this is all taxable because it's loading finished product. And this is just a repeat of that earlier picture for the final drying and screening. Here's more of the truck and rail load out here. And then these are examples of what's considered exempt equipment. And we also have waste treatment. Not only, I mentioned, oops. I don't know what happened here. Oh, there we go. But dust collection equipment that you need, that would be considered waste treatment equipment. Waste treatment is a special exemption statewide. It's not just for manufacturers, automobile body shops. There's a lot of other industries and companies can get the exemption if they have the proper equipment for dust collection or water treatment, things like that. And this will be taxable equipment, dozers, forklifts, finished product, like I mentioned, generator, any power generation. If rail cars are privately owned, they're not too, we don't have a lot of them, but if they have rail cars that are not involved in the interstate traffic owned by the traditional rail companies, like Burlington Northern, Santa Fe, and Canadian National, those are taxable, and that can be very significant because a brand new rail car it costs a lot of money. Rail spurs are land improvements here, and that's right, she says we got it. Rail spurs, those are very costly, and we're seeing with new frac-sand plants, there's a lot of rail spurs being put. I mean, and they're very expensive to build those. And one of the reasons, I think down at EOG, they've got 10 or 12 lines, dead-end rail spur lines there, and they spent millions of dollars constructing them. And one of the reasons is when they load those rail cars, or when they're empty, when they bring them back, if they're left on the Canadian National or Burlington Northern's lines, they have to pay rent. So I've been told they keep them off their lines, otherwise it gets too expensive. So they'll store them on their own property. However, it's a big investment for the frac-sand companies to put those rail spurs in. Raw material storage, tanks and silos, safety communication equipment, shipping, receiving, sweeping, anything doing the cleanup, that's all taxable. Truck scales, wells or land improvements, that's all taxable as well. The EOG plant, and I'm sure a number of you have been by there in Chippewa Falls. I live only a mile from that plant. They're going to be building two. It's going to look like a moonscape. They have their two sand piles there now. But the problem is they want to ship and process all winter, and when that sand's got moisture in it, even after they dry it, they can't, our climate, it's going to freeze on them. They've had problems with it. So they are in the process of building two of these gigantic, enormous domes out of concrete. And they're going to fill those, it's going to look like a pyramid without the actual pyramid at the top. And it's going to be an extremely expensive proposition. And they're going to heat those domes at low temperature so they can take that sand and ship it all winter. When it becomes frozen, then it becomes in chunks, and they had a lot of problems with it. So they've been actually approved through the Chippewa Falls Plan Commission. They got a conditional use permit approved to build two of these domes. And I do know about it because I'm on the Plan Commission, and we did approve it a week ago. In this case, with a dry plant equipment that's exempt, you're bagging, bucket elevators, which is transporting the sand, conveyors, all the conveyors and processes to get the sand there, dump hoppers, fluid bed coolers, dryers, magnetic removal, anything that's working the sand to get it along to be a finished product is all exempt. And then taxable at a dry plant, conveyors to the trucks or rail for loading out a finished product storage, tanks and silos, and those sand domes, as I described them, that EOG in Chippewa Falls is building, those will be taxable, and it's going to cost them millions of dollars to put those. We saw some nice color pictures of two of them, similar to what they want to build that were down in Texas, and it looked like a moonscape. It was so strange looking to see these massive domes sitting on the prairie there. Fuel tanks, generators, of course, raw material storage that they might use in the process, rail cars again, and then truck scales. And then mine site equipment that's exempt would be blasting, crushing, excavating, and screening, initial screening. And then taxable would be any buildings, fuel tanks on site, loaders for stockpile management, rail cars again, spurs, truck scales, and wells. I guess we're back to the start here. So that's just a general overview of the manufacturing office, what we do in Eau Claire. It's not just for Frac-Sand, but then in this case, our PowerPoint presentation is geared to an actual Frac-Sand plant that's been around for many years down in Jackson County. Okay, any questions from the floor here? Yes.
I'm just curious, when a company goes to get it.
Pardon? No.
Hello. My question is, when a manufacturing company gets a rezone or a permit, why doesn't the county authorizing the permit send notice to the Department of Revenue automatically?
Okay, the question is when a,
You were saying that the only way you know is word of mouth, so on and so forth.
there's
So
various forms of finding out, right?
wouldn't it be more efficient if, when they get their permit, that county notifies the Department of Revenue?
It would be, but that's not the case right now. We welcome any building permits, you know, if Vets Plus gets a building permit from the village of Napier, it would be nice if we got a copy of it. Some of the municipalities we work in are very good because they have full-time building inspection departments and staff that does that. But most of your towns and villages which comprise our district, they don't have that. It's contracted out, or they don't issue that many permits in a year. I know what you're saying. Why don't they
Right.
talk to each other? But I've got about a handful of municipalities that are really good about forwarding building permits to us when they know it's a manufacturer involved. And the only way that they'll know is, well, the name on there. You know, like when Calumet Refining, they're always doing something in a refinery. When they get building permits, every time they touch anything, they got building permits up there for electrical, particularly.
Right.
Just the city sends them to me automatic, but then they've got 4 full-time staff in their building inspection department that does that. But I wish we'd have more communication like that, and we would welcome it. But it's not the case on the town and usually the small village level.
Okay, thank you.
I read in the Chippewa paper and the Eau Claire paper that EOG paid last year $1 million in taxes. And I don't know what that puts their assessment at, maybe 30 or maybe 50 million. We got Fairmount and Menominee, and they said they were going to spend 50 or 60 million building it, but it's only assessed at, I don't know, 20 million. And it's the total tax bill was only $70,000 with $10,000 going to the township.
Okay.
70,000 versus $1 million. What did Fairmount do different so they pay so much less taxes?
Well, you're talking about 2 different companies in 2 different locations. Now, the EOG plant in Chippewa Falls, this year, the tax bill will represent a completed, finished plant. In other words, when they first initially started the plant, there was not a lot going on. There wasn't much to value. The second year we did it, I think it's been almost 3 years they've been constructing that plant. The second year, it was significantly more. And now this year, we've made a final assessment on there as it's completed. Now, they're going to add these sand domes that I mentioned. But, so remember, the tax bill is just catching up with the valuation of the property.
But Fairmount's been there like
Now, okay, now
4 years.
Yeah, Fairmont, what they may say or what might show up in the paper is one thing. But I've been to the Fairmont plant. It's in the town of Red Cedar, is where it's not in the city of Menominee. I've been there personally. I did an inspection there last fall it was. And they don't have a lot of buildings there. I don't, you know, when things get in the newspaper saying they're going to invest 60 million, I don't know where that number comes from. They report to us all that equipment and any land improvements and buildings they put up. They really only have one building there. There's it's part office, part maintenance shop, and that. That's all they have there. Everything else is behind there to the south, and it's conveyed up to the plant, which is right behind their maintenance facility and office facility there. I don't know if that's long-term. They're looking maybe over 15 or 20 years, but I'd be careful with running it with a number that shows up in a newspaper or somebody says, we're going to invest 60 million. We only go by what they're reporting to us. If they've got $10 million of personal property, 5 million of it could be exempt equipment. 8 million could be. But I know there's only one building, really significant building there.
But I saw their tax receipt, and it was $70,000 in taxes, and then according to the Eau Claire Chippewa papers, EOJ paid $1 million, which obviously the taxpayers would rather collect $1 million than.
Yeah, EOG is going to pay whatever. I don't know what I don't see their tax bill. We put the value on the property. But I know that their tax bill, I'm pretty darn sure, and I'm on the plan commission, I've approved a lot of that stuff. I know it's going to go up quite significantly because they're now at the so-called completed plant stage with more to be added, like I mentioned. Yes, ma'am.
The real estate taxes will be assessed to whoever owns the land?
Exactly. It may not be the Frac-Sand company.
Okay, so if they lease the land, the property owner will be paying the real estate taxes, right?
It will be in their name. They may have an arrangement with them possibly that they might pay for part of it. I don't, you know, that's an arrangement we wouldn't be have privilege to.
So is that real estate assessment or taxes due whether the company is active or not? Let's say they let's say for some reason, you know, there's a bust in the sand industry.
Which could happen.
Okay, so whatever improvements had been made on that piece of land, would the landowner still be responsible for those taxes?
Sure. If the sand company pulled out, is what you're saying, asking?
Right.
And they put these improvements on the land where they're mining it or processing it.
Right.
The landowner is responsible for that tax bill, sure.
Thank you.
My question is very simple. I worked out in North Dakota. I've been out there for 9 months. Granted, this is a little different, but I've seen small towns being torn apart by this with the taxes. The question I have is, your taxes, are they going to get spread to the locals, or where are they going? Because out there, they are not going to the local people. They are ripping these roads apart. And with the taxes, are you going to get taxed more? Because with the heavy amount of trucks that you're talking about bringing in here, you're leaving potholes out there the size of axles that are breaking on semis. And that is not BS, sir. That is a fact. I have been out there, I've seen it, and that very much concerns me because these people have cars that are going to be traveling on this road, and if you don't get these roads fixed, you're going to have to be taxed a heck of a lot more than what an average business is going to be. And that's my concern, because it's not being done out there. And whether it's going to be done here or not, it's a valid question.
Well, I can't speak to. I know what you're saying is there's a lot of peripheral damage that Frac-Sand, or in this case, the oil exploration and extraction, is causing to the roads, to the communities, and that. Well, I can't speak what's going on there. I have no doubt what you're saying. But I know in Chippewa County, EOG and the trucking company that's doing the trucking for them, they've got agreements with some of the local municipalities, and the Chippewa County Highway Commissioner has an agreement in terms of and I think I was at the Frac-Sand conference in January. I think our highway commissioner indicated that there's a state law that if you do damage to the roads, you're going to be held responsible for it.
Well, that's what was said out there, and whether you know what's going on or not, all you have to do is turn on a TV, put it on YouTube, and you'll see what's going on. My question is you're kind of avoiding the question. I understand what you're saying as far as making so-and-so pay, and we have agreements, but they had agreements out there, and that's when big business comes in, that's my concern.
Okay.
With the tax.
Yeah, well, I'm not avoiding the question. I don't think I have an answer for it per se. Our job that I explain in terms of manufacturing assessment is to value the real estate and personal property and monitor the exemption that they get for the M&E equipment. That's our responsibility here.
I have a more general question. Thank you very much for presenting, by the way. When Kelly presented at the Wisconsin Towns Association conference in January, there were some slides that you guys offered that I thought were really helpful, that gave a sort of set of examples of sort of what you might expect to see for a net investment of, say, $10 million. And my recollection is, I think, in the example slide that Kelly had offered, $10 million netted out to about $23,000. I think this is personal property in tax assessment.
Okay.
The other thing that that was interesting was they sort of, I wonder if you could speak a little bit to the variables about whether taxes go up or down, to what extent they go up or down. I'm thinking specifically of, in town of Glenwood, at a recent meeting, there was effectively a promise made to the local community that as the result of a $60 million investment on the part of a sand mine company, that the local residents could expect to see their personal property bills go down by 1/3. That seemed highly questionable to me as a former town official. I did approach the official in question and asked him where that math was coming from. And I really got the impression that it was a misunderstanding. But I would love for you, since you've got some expertise in this, to sort of explain how it might be that, I think you sort of referred to it before, just because there's a $60 million investment doesn't mean you're going to have a $60 million valuation. And then, of course, at the town level, the percentage of a total tax-based shift nets out at a relatively small change in the bill that I'm going to see when I get my property taxes, since very little of it is really related to the town, yeah.
Well, I think I would be, as a property owner, as a citizen myself, I would be skeptical of somebody promising that your taxes are going to go down 1/3 and are going to go down 1/2. It's just talk, really. The manufacturing exemption, we can't avoid that. If a company spends $50 million and $30 million of their plant is exempt legally under the manufacturing law for M&E, machinery equipment, there's nothing we can change that.
Sure.
We assess things. It's no different than with any other company. Is it taxable or is it exempt? Is it production equipment? Is it producing the product or not? So that talk up front of promises of taxes going down, you'd have to get it in writing, I think, or the alternative is a payment in lieu of taxes. Make someone sign something. I mean, I'm not playing attorney here at all, but I know what a payment in lieu of taxes are. I've seen it in some of the TIF developments in communities. Then they need to pick up the tab extra if it doesn't meet the level of assessment on the final product of the buildings, equipment, et cetera.
So my recollection again, and I have the copy of the original presentation. If folks would like a copy, the PDF was made available by the Wisconsin Towns Association, which was really nice. And I'm not sure I've got the number exactly right, but I think Kelly had sort of thrown out a general range of about 8 to 12% based on the projects that they'd seen to date that they were finding was actually taxable. And now that was based on processing plants and mines, and I'm sure it was kind of a mishmash of a number, so it's a range.
Sure.
But does that sound vaguely approximate
Well,
to you?
in terms of, and let's qualify that, I think you're alluding to the personal property
Correct.
only, not to the real estate.
Yeah.
Because the real estate is taxable. There's very few exemptions for real estate unless it's a waste treatment building, a waste treatment plant or something.
That's right.
That type of thing. But that sounds about accurate. It varies by industry. It varies. You get some industries in like metal fabrication where they've got lots of expensive equipment, or you got CNC machines that cost $1 million and they'll have 10 or 12 of them. That's what they're doing. They're going to have very little taxable because those machines are so expensive to buy, and they are exempt. You know, there's no question. Where the sand processing, there's more. Seems to be there's a little higher percentage because I can't put statistics on it because we're learning about sand processing. It's just, you know, there's been a tidal wave of the development with sand processing plants.
And I would imagine too that you have to think about the personal property changes and the assessments around that area, which could go potentially down, I suppose, arguably up, but there's going to be shifts in the surrounding community
Right.
as well.
Well, the local assessor is involved in there. We're only going to assess where the sand processing plant is. If you've got houses down the road or up the road, you know, you have other residential development, that's, the local assessor needs to take into account if there's problems there of maintaining those property values, or there's been a detriment to it because of the truck traffic and things like that.
Thanks. Anybody other questions?
One more question, I think, back there.
Mine will be very brief. I just had a question. You had spoke about taxing and based upon the time when they complete their build, do you see it when you do a informational contact with these people and they set up a time frame that basically my understanding is it's at a very minimal tax until they've completed their proposal or completed their plant, and then at that time you do a final? So is there a window of like a 3-year term or a 5-year term, or is every project different before it's fully taxed, I guess?
Yeah, you're asking is there a time frame they have to get it done and then we raise the value and that type of thing? Not really. It's basically, it's partial as they report it to us. If it's 50% done or 30%, or they just started it late in the fall, you're not going to have a lot of value there. But companies, when they build a new plant, whether it's a Frac-Sand plant or whether it's a metal fabbing plant, they want to get the plant up and running as fast as they can so they get production, because that's really their business. They're not going to wait 3, 4, 5 years and say, let's not put the siding on, or let's leave part of the roof off so we don't get valued any higher. They're in business to get the plant up and running and employ people too.
Do you usually see that to be like a 1 to 2 year or a 3-year?
Usually, well, like the EOG plant is so massive there. You know, I don't know, I know some people have been driven by there. It just looms on the horizon there, the investment you see. That was nearly a 3-year project by the time they started that, and they're always refining it too a little bit. They find things that aren't working the way, which is like those sand domes that they're going to put up, because they found they had problems with the sand freezing last winter, and last winter was a very mild winter. But companies usually it's done in within a year and a half. The plant is up. I mean, it depends. It could be a 300,000-400,000 square foot building. You know, it's going to take a long time to get that thing up and operational, and get your equipment in there. You got to get your power in there, get your machine set, and you know, by the time you got shipping, you got raw materials. It depends all what you're doing there. But I can't, from my perspective personally, companies when they build a plant, they want to get it up and operational, because that's their business. Make the product.
Either you gentlemen want to ask a question? Okay. Chris, I'll probably speed up the answers a little bit.
Pardon?
Maybe speed things up just a little bit.
Okay.
In regards to those roads in North Dakota, we were coming back from Florida, and we flew with this guy that invented a bunch of stuff for the oil wells. And he said the cities, not the counties, have to have a tax, a transportation tax. Not, the counties don't have nothing to do with it. I already talked to St. Croix County on Monday. They also said it has to be the city, not the county, to put in a tax when they present it to get their permit to, you know, do their mining. His estimate was each city should put in 2 cents per ton for every ton that's shipped on that rail.
You're talking about an occupational tax.
Yeah, because the road tax, that's gonna take care of your highways and everything. But
Right.
this is gonna be a constant circle here.
Right.
And they're just gonna beat the heck out of the roads, and that's gonna create lots of problems. But it's up to the city, he said, to put it into that permit.
Well, I think the state would have to enact an additional occupational tax on sand. We already have an occupational tax on grain, coal, and taconite in this state, and I think there's one other thing that has an occupational. We've had it for many years. I think that has to come from the state and the legislature, but it's they're not.
That's what he said exactly what you said you were gonna say. He said the city has to look into this.
Well, the
Not-
town or village
and-
as well.
and the village, and then the county will take it from there, and the process will go.
Well, because frac-sands are in various, they're primarily in this part of the states, but they're across many different counties and locations. I think
Yeah,
you'd be
right.
looking at a statewide occupational tax on there.
Okay. Next question. How many acres does a processing plant take up? How much area? How many acres?
Well, the actual plant doesn't take a lot of
No,
acreage.
no, but I mean, you know, there's storage and there's railroad.
Well, down in Jackson County, I'm assessing hundreds of acres, I think 500 or 600 acres to that sand processing plant.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to make.
It's more than 5 or 10.
Yeah,
Because they're extracting and mining all around the whole area there.
yeah,
They
right.
keep,
That's
they
what-
keep working out,
That's what's
obviously.
gonna happen here. It starts in Glenwood City, and then you're gonna find, that's why they want this circle here. There'll be 4 or 5 mines around here. So that this 15, 20 trucks ain't gonna be nothing, people.
Let's have one more question.
I don't necessarily have a question, I have a comment. My name's Jack Clark, I'm on the Planning Commission of the town of Stanton. We're putting together a mining ordinance right now, and one of the biggest parts of it is to control the roads and to make sure that the operator is responsible for the maintenance, ongoing maintenance, and the repair of the road when they're ready to leave. It's just a comment on what we're doing. And I think most of the towns are probably along the same lines.
Sure. I think you gotta protect your roads, especially if they're gonna transport in wintertime, but perhaps, Mr. Koshishek, you touched on that with the town of Howard.
We'll touch on all, I think,
Sure.
on that issue in the next 2 presentations, both. So with that, thanks, Curtis.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.